be loved. And Jesus knows how to do it right.
Open the eyes of my heart.
picking on my faces, the faces I'm making, because my shoulder is actually killing me this morning. It's funny. You would think something like playing a guitar wouldn't be, what's the big deal? It's just a shoulder. And then you realize you got to put your hand up here and hold it and do this. And it's like, so interesting morning already. But that's all right. It's good. Everything's good. Speaking of good and what's going on and all that fun stuff, any announcements for us this morning? Or?
No?
I'm
here. I made it.
That's good. That's good. Being here and making it
That's
big
an
part of what we do.
So far.
Well, it was funny because I was looking at about 25 past and I was like, I don't know if people are going to show up today. It's really nice out and maybe we'll just have a very intimate service, but this is good. This is still a small enough crew where it's going to be intimate but fun. So, well, let's pray before we start, and because we haven't prayed yet, and that's always a good thing to do, not just to fill time, because if that's what we're doing, then I don't know why we're here. But it's a good thing to do because we want God to bless the service. We want to hear from Him, and so we're going to come to Him and ask that He bless the time. So let's pray together. Father, thank you for your love, for your grace, and that we do focus on that because it is what you're all about. Father, it's from the beginning until the very end, grace has been the picture. And we get confused as people because we get drawn into this world and the things we do and think so much that we play a bigger part. But Father, what you've done is you played the big part and said, please come in and be a part of what it is that's been done for you. And in that I will bless. And Father, we thank you for that. We ask your blessing today, even as we come to your word and listen to what you have to say to us. May it be your words. Help us to get out of the way and to put you at the forefront. And we'll just thank you for what you do here today in Christ's name. Amen. Well, last week I talked a little bit about communication with God. And that basically He looks out for our best interest because even as we try and pray and talk to God, the Holy Spirit has to come in and groan on our behalf, on our part, because we pray for things that we think, genuinely we think, oh, this is what I need to pray for. And the Holy Spirit's like, no, that's not what you want to pray for. That is not what you want. We talked about how oftentimes we are fooled into thinking that we desperately need something, and in reality, we don't. And we end up with things in our lives, things like boats, things like, whatever it is. They're great. There's nothing wrong with having a boat, but, you look at, oh, it's all about this, and then you get me, you're like, oh, it's just something else to take care of, isn't it? So it's interesting how God, on our behalf, says, I know what you really want. Let me pray about that for you. And it reminds me of the little child that comes up with, these requests of what they might want, or little pictures that they draw. And why are they precious to us, and why do we laugh at what they ask for and then later give them what they really wanted to begin with? Because we realize in our superior intellect that they're just kids, that their hearts are so well-meaning and yet they're way off base. That's a great picture of us with God. It really is. It's such a good picture of us. And so as I speak this week, I may get emotional because I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that same verse, but taking it a step further, because last week we read these two verses, Romans chapter 8, verse 26 and 27, talking about God praying on our behalf. It says, in the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weaknesses. We do not know what we ought to pray, but for the Spirit Himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And He who searches the heart and knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. And that's what we talked about last week. But we didn't go to the next verse, which I'm sure that most of you know, and have heard, and have understood. And that next verse is, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. You heard that verse before? And it's a simple verse, but it has so much. We as a church family have been going through a lot of stuff lately. And I don't know how many people know all the different ins and outs of whatever, but for those of you that know about someone's struggles and what they're going through, you're there to help, to be a part of that process, to love on them. You can't necessarily, you don't have the answers per se, but once you become aware of it, become part of the process of just loving on them and making sure that they know that this family cares for them. And we've been going through a lot. And it blows my mind to sit and think of what's been happening. And I almost wonder, is it, allowed that we go through so much so that we turn even further to looking to God's grace and saying, we need you? Is it because we're doing good things here in the community that we represent, not just here in Rochester, but every one of you go out into the world every week and you live what it is you believe. You live grace, and people see in you that grace, and therefore you're an agent of God in this world. And so therefore is the enemy coming and I don't know what it is, but I know that a lot of things have been coming, and many of you know that Heather, when she had her baby, Kyle and Heather, that Heather came very close, was in peril. She came very close to dying, and they really had to work hard to make sure that she made it. And that's scary. And I heard about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so scary, and I didn't know and all that. But being a part of it from the outside and being a part of it up front can be very different. My daughter had a baby just like 4 days ago. And it was so exciting that we're going to have another grandbaby. But in that, she had the same thing that Heather had, and worse in the sense that she was bleeding and they couldn't stop the bleeding. So her kidney was failing, she was bleeding out, and we didn't fully know it at the time, but she became very close to death. And after that took place, looking back, on the way home from New Hampshire, I looked at Linda and I said, this could be a very different ride. And the thought of that was just horrifying. But in the process of looking what happened, many things took place that I can't help but see the hand of God in. And even if it didn't happen that way, God's hand was in it. But when we look back and we see that she woke up first thing in the morning, she was in pain, and she was like, I just have gas, and Jeff was like, no, we're going to the hospital. Her husband, Jeff. No, yes, we are. So that, in and of itself, saved her life. Then they got to the hospital, and she didn't have any of the symptoms, nothing that indicated that she would have this condition. And yet there was one nurse there, actually there was two, one of which said, I wouldn't have ordered that test. The other one said, we should do a lab. And they did it. And thank God they did, because if they didn't do that, there's no way they would have caught this in time. And so all those little things added up and came around to the point where she made it through. Even if it was just barely, she made it through. And now, she's on the other side, and we're happy that she is completely healthy. Everything is great, and that little baby is cute, cute, cute. As Jake said, what are they, people say, what are they going to name her? What are they going to name her? And Jake said, I think they should name her Trouble, because she's already caused quite a bit. So I think he was on to something, but we'll see how that goes. But so, going through this, I realized not only was it scary for us, but this is a very, very, very rare condition that happened to both Heather and Janelle. And yet here we are within 8 months in the same body of Christ that two of those cases happened. There are less than what? 20,000, what is it? 20,000 a year. There are less than 20,000 a year of this. And we had two of them within 8 months. And it was just like, what's going on? But even in that, as I prayed for safety, and I prayed that the doctor's hands would be, just doing exactly what they needed to do, that their minds would know what they had to do, even in that prayer, my prayers were less than what they should have been, I'm sure. As we talked about the other week. My prayers are less than what they should have been, because what was I praying with? My mind, my heart which was emotionally pulled into something. Now, I know that every one of us has prayed that kind of prayer somewhere in our lives, right? Something's going on and we're like, God, just protect, just save, just whatever it is, right? And all of us having that prayer, we had what was best in mind for the person we loved. We wanted to, oh God, do this, do this. But what if it wasn't what was best for everyone that was involved? Now, how could that possibly be, you say? I mean, you're praying and you're saying, oh, do this, but listen to the verse that we read earlier. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. We've all been on the other side of the prayer when we pray for it to go right, and it, what? It doesn't. And what do we do with this verse when we see that? That all things good, all things that have to happen for the good of those who love Him, who are called according to His purpose. I got to thinking about that, and I thought, as we think about what is best for those who love Him, who is those who love Him? Who is that group of people? Those who love Him. It's not always us. It's not always the one we're praying for. If He's doing what's best for those who love Him, sometimes He's going to have to do some crazy things in our lives to help those who love Him in a different area. Does that make sense? Let me see if I can tone it in and bring it in a little bit. The day that I was praying, and I didn't even fully know because I wasn't at the hospital, I was watching Little Reagan. Have you seen Reagan? She's a little tank. Running around like, she kept me very busy, and I thank God for that because I couldn't have picked up on all the things that were going on. But even in the prayers that I was praying, I couldn't pray what God ultimately would pray. Not my will, but your will be done. I couldn't have prayed that because my baby was on the table and her life was the one that I was praying about. I couldn't do it. What if it was the right prayer? He would do it. Why? Why might that be the right prayer? And thank God it wasn't. But why might it be? I don't know. But He says all things work for the good of those who love Him. Sometimes what we don't understand, and I'm trying to remember because I have a really funny story, that what we don't understand is that even though something is true, there's more truth behind it, and God knows the ultimate. So the story that I was going to talk about is I had this friend in ministry he was a ball of fire, and he would just say whatever was on his mind. He didn't care. And he was going out one day to raise support. And he came back because he was like working with me, and I was trying to train him and help him out in a lot of different ways. And he came back from trying to raise support one day, and he said, I said, how'd it go? He said, it didn't go so good. I don't think I got the support. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, we were talking, and the guy started talking about how he didn't sin because he became a Christian, so he didn't sin anymore. And he said, he looked at the guy and said, you're telling me you think you don't sin because you became a Christian, that you're perfect? And the guy's like, yeah, once I became a Christian, I'm not. And he said, you're a liar. And I said, well, that may have been true, but I don't think you're going to raise a lot of support that way. So maybe what you can do is try and curb it a little bit and say, that's not the way I see things, but okay, maybe we can talk more. And so in the process of Ray bringing this truth out, what he did was he shut down any communication with the person that he was talking with. And so what I was thinking of when I looked at this, it's like, how do we see things when we're in the midst of those difficulties? How do we understand them, and what kind of things do? We do the same thing like Ray. Maybe we shut things down and we do whatever. God has a different way. He has a different way. As we read last week, And just backing up just a little bit, it says, in the same way the Spirit helps us in our weaknesses. We have, every one of us have weaknesses that we, I think, struggle to necessarily understand in and of ourselves. We would oftentimes be like that guy, like, nope, this is where I stand, this is what's true. That guy, if you would ask him today, are you still sinless? What do you think he'd probably tell you? Yeah, I still don't sin because I'm a Christian and I'm perfect and all this stuff. Do you think he sins on a regular basis? Yeah, okay. So where is the breakdown in that situation? It's not his heart. His heart's in the right place, more than likely, but his mind is just not connecting with that. And as I read that, I read something out of my book that we haven't read out of this in a little bit, but I thought it connected with that. Listen what it's talking about. Daniel in the lion's den. How many people have heard that story before? All right? And so Daniel's in and amongst this kingdom, and the king that he's under really does actually like him quite a bit. And some of the guys in the king's court get him to make an edict. They get him to say, hey, listen, king, you're the king. Everyone should be bowing down to you, praying to you. Make an edict that if they don't bow down to you, you're going to kill them. The king does that, and this is kind of where this takes off. When Daniel worships his own God, Darius, the king, doesn't change the rules for him. This seems ridiculous. The king loves Daniel. He doesn't want Daniel to die. And he's the king. Why doesn't he just change the rules? Well, it doesn't work that way. The law is inflexible. Not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of the pen will be changed. There is no wiggle room. This is terrible news for us sinners. One of the great misconceptions about Christianity is that grace involves setting aside, circumventing, or ignoring the rules, the law. At the very least, we think of Jesus' work as lowering the bar of the law. He takes all of God's laws and turns them into, do your best, to love God and to love one another. But this is a profoundly flawed view of Christ's work. He spends the whole Sermon on the Mount, for instance, raising the bar of the law, more accurately showing how high the bar of the law has always been. Because when Jesus came in, he said, listen, you've heard it say, don't be with another woman or whatever. And he says, but I tell you, don't even look at a woman. If you look at a woman with lust in your heart, it's like you've been with her. And that took the law and brought it to a whole new level. And every guy that ever heard that, from the time that Jesus spoke it to this day, as soon as they hear that, what do? What should they do? Right? Because every guy in the world knows that at some point or another he's looking in a way that he shouldn't, right? Or is it just me? So we know that Jesus raised that bar and he said, listen, the law is not forgiving at all. The law says this is what it is, and it's in an even higher level because it's not just what exactly you do, but the attitudes and actions of your thoughts in your heart. So he took it to a whole new level. When we sin, God does not set aside the law, though. And this is so important. So many people think this. Oh, God just said, I'll set it aside. I'll find a way that you won't have to pay for it. We'll just tuck it in the corner. When we sin, God does not set aside the law. If he did, we could never have any assurance or peace. That's a profound statement. What is he going to do next time? What if we do something worse? What if we keep doing the same thing we did? Is he going to keep setting aside the law? This is not grace, and it does not lead to peace. It leads rather to fear. When we count on the rules being relaxed for us, we're hoping on something in which we have no confidence. Very true statement. If God would have just be taking it and saying, don't worry about it, when would he decide to stop doing that? And what if God was doing that, and then we looked and we said, well, what about the Ted Bundys of the world? If you let us aside and you're just saying, I'm not going to count that, what about that? Jesus didn't do that. The good news is that God does better than setting aside the law. He closes the lions' mouths. Jesus did not come to relax the law. He came to fulfill it for us. When we find ourselves called onto the carpet of life, we don't have to hope that the law gets ignored. We don't have to hope that the law gets changed. We don't have to hope that we can bend the rules. We can know that the law has been placed on the shoulders of another, and that he has cast to the lions in our place. Daniel awoke the next morning without a scratch, saved by God. Jesus does one better. He was raised victorious over sin and death, and not just for himself, but for us. That is so true, and we see it, and we thank God for it. But at the time the disciples went through what they did, when the disciples were with Jesus, and he was giving them all these promises and talking about life, and then he ended up dying on a cross in front of them, and there was nothing they could do. And they didn't understand it at the time, did they? Do you think that they had been praying about what was coming up? Do you think that they were praying and saying, God, you've got to stop this process. This is crazy. We know that you have our back. We know that you love us. We know that you're going to do the best for us. And they prayed together, and they had the assurance that God was going to do it right. And they still watched Jesus, their leader, die before their eyes. Do you think that they felt like something was going wrong? Do you think that they felt like God wasn't answering the prayer that they were putting out there? They must have been bewildered. What is going on? This is ridiculous. And we know in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. Who are the those that Jesus was loving at the time he died on that cross? Not only the disciples, although they didn't understand why he would be dying on that cross, but of the whole world. And they did have to go through that horrible, agonizing time and praying and feeling like God wasn't answering their prayer because God was doing what was good for those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. He was dying for the sins of the world, and they didn't see it. In our situations, it's very easy to see that, well, why do we have to go through this? Why is this happening? Sometimes we have to go through hell so that others won't have to. Let me say that again. Sometimes we have to go through hell so that others won't have to. Is God using you in some way that you don't even know, that someone else sees and says, I want that truth? Or I've just become aware of that truth. I'm going to play a song for you right now, and the words are going to be up here. It's a song by Eric Clapton. It's called Tears in Heaven. And I want you to think about what's going on. Let me give you a little background. He lost his son. And that's when he wrote this song. Do I think that Eric Clapton, all of a sudden came and understood God and all that stuff? No. Do I think that God did this? No. But through these things, we can become aware. Our eyes can be opened. We can all of a sudden see things we never would. And I think that in this, there's a little bit of a message with that. So I'm going to play that. I'm going to close this down so we can actually see. Let me close the door real quick. So the words of that song bring up a lot of thoughts. I mean, here he loses a child and it's horrible. He's writing this song about heaven. What's it like? Will you know me? I know there'll be no more tears. I know, and he has all these different thoughts. And what struck out to me in that song is that Eric Clapton is thinking about heaven. Eric Clapton is thinking about his child there. He's like, will you know me when I get there? And he also has that element of, I don't belong here. I don't belong, it's not right. Now I know he's probably thinking more like the time maybe later, but the question is, does he come out in the end thinking more and more about, well, what is heaven? And my child is there. Do I need this? How do I get there? What kind of thing? And I can tell you that because of God's word, we know. Will you know each other in heaven? When you see those who have gone ahead, will they know you? Will they remember you? Absolutely. There's the answer right there. And so all these different things that came up in this song, I thought, that's a horrible thing he went through. But if God could use something like that, not cause it, but use it, to get someone to look at something they normally wouldn't have, what do you do? What do you do? As I went back to looking at Jesus on the cross and what the disciples went through, I can't help but think that we go through the same things. That we struggle at times and we go, I don't get this. Why would you do this? And I can tell you from the standpoint of having my father die when I was 7 years old, believe me, I didn't get it. Here he was, a preacher of the gospel. What'd you take him for? What was that all about? And I still want to ask him when I get there. Wouldn't have done it that way. But I know in the end he'll say, look at this. Look at this. We focus so much on the here and now, but what is the ultimate end and what's most important? Heaven, forever. And so when he says these verses, and we know in all things that God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. He has a purpose in everything. I thank God that Janelle is here. I thank God that we don't have that time that we were like, what happened? And even through the craziness that we went through, I know that God had and has a purpose for all things. I could not have prayed, not my will, but your will. Couldn't have done it. But I know in my prayers, the Holy Spirit was saying, whatever you got, it's right. As we go through life and move forward just through the weeks to come and stuff, and people will run into things and will have the opportunities to share, I think it's important to look at these kind of things because many of us are going through hard times. And we have to be able to just love and come beside and we don't want the answer to be, well, God's got a purpose in this. That's the truth, we know it. But what we can do is, knowing that, we can just come up and say, we love you. We're here. What can we do to help? Why? Because we do know that God works for the good in all things for those who love him and call according to his purpose. Let's pray as we close. Father, thank you for your love and your grace, and that you know us better than we know ourselves. That, Father, you have a plan and we don't always understand it, but it's a perfect plan. And in the end, we will understand it. As we go through this life, Father, help us, as the children that we are in your eyes, to do the best we can. You see our hearts. You love the fact that we come to you, we trust you, we do the best, and yet we're still failing and falling all over the place. Father, help us to understand that truth and just to come and know that in the end, everything will be right. So that we will do the best we can in what we do, but we will pray knowing that it's really up to you. It's you, God. And as we do that, Father, help us to just love those around us in a way that shares that truth. And we'll thank you for it, Christ. Amen. Go have a great week, and thank God for the things that he does.